Hey everyone, it's Cass here on Transform Your Life, and you're gonna have to excuse the blackness and just pay attention to my voice because I'm in a particular situation right now, an undercover situation where I cannot film myself or my surroundings. So, yeah, just bear with the blackness because the message is the most important thing on my channel. Now, I was listening to my videos, my most recent videos, and one in particular that this was really important for me to expand upon right now is when I was sharing the continuation of my story. And I was talking about human trafficking. I realized that there were some things I said in that video that I need to expand upon. This is really important that I don't wait to expand upon this. Some of the things I said in that video. And before I do, I want to say, my experience as a human trafficking survivor has allowed me to make so many connections in my life in so many different ways. And these connections that I've made as a human trafficking survivor allowed me to become aware of a lot of information that allowed me to make my discovery regarding reversing the aging process. This is really important to understand as you watch my content, that as I've been able to observe the exploitation, all the different ways we exploit each other in this society, including the ways that I was able to observe as a human trafficking survivor, I was able to make connections regarding the aging process and making my discovery in regard to reversing the aging process, right? So that's something that I want to share. Now, there's a lot that goes into reversing the aging process, right? It's not just regarding elements of human trafficking and the relationship dynamics regarding human trafficking, but human trafficking and myself as a survivor who has an embodied experience allowed me to really be able to become aware of a lot of blind spots, blind spots that I had in regarding the cellular damage that happens to us as a people when we are exploitative, and how it impacts all living beings and how it impacts planet Earth, right? So with all of that being said, there's something really important that I need to not wait to expand upon as I go along in my content. Now, there's a lot of things that I'm going to share regarding human trafficking on my channel because there are a lot of myths regarding human trafficking, because a lot of people have this very specific image in their mind when it comes to human trafficking because of Hollywood and how Hollywood has portrayed human trafficking. And the image that Hollywood has portrayed is 100% real and true, and that form of human trafficking actually happens. 100%, but there are also so many other different forms of human trafficking and different ways it manifests. And this is something that I'm going to get into on my channel. And it's really important that everyone understands this human trafficking mentality. If you want to reverse the aging process, you need to understand this exploitative way of being, right? Because it's manifesting on an interpersonal level and it's manifesting on a large scale. And the large scale manifestation of it and the interpersonal manifestation of it is a huge contributing factor to our dis-ease that we experience as human beings on this planet. It's a major contributing factor to all chaos and disorder and dysfunction on this planet, okay? So give me just a moment. I've lost my train of thought for a minute because, okay, now I'm remembering what I was gonna say. In my video, a couple videos back, I was talking about that I have never prostituted myself as a woman who's been navigating her life here in America, living through what I've lived through as a survivor, as a woman who's fought to be able to experience freedom here in America, who has been a law-abiding citizen, who has, I would say a pretty straight-laced background. I don't have a criminal record. I've been a pretty like badass American citizen. Like I'm not a menace to society, and I'm really like focused on myself. Like I mind my own business. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm really focused on building my own business. I'm not involved in a lot of bullshit that a lot of people are these days. And even though I've really gone above and beyond to do the right things in my life, I haven't been able to experience freedom. The freedom that that most people talk about here in the US, right? Being able to live in this nation that people say is a free nation. I have experienced a lot of imprisonment here in the US because of these circumstances that I was born into and that I've had to manifest out of. And I've manifested a lot of miracles, a lot of amazing manifestations, a lot of blessings, a lot of luck, because I've always done the right thing and I never chose the dark side in all of this, and I definitely could have. And one of the things that I really was guided to share, not only by my spiritual team, but my own moral and ethical compass inside of me as a public educator, is that when I was talking in my video about prostitution here in the US and women who are in circumstances like mine who are on the street, I was sharing part of my story about how I am an adult who can consent to sexual transactions with other people. Now, something that I failed to say, which is incredibly important for people to start becoming aware of these exploitative behaviors within themselves and the way they show up with other people, how they interact with other people, and also to become aware of these, myths around human trafficking and how human trafficking goes down and how people are approaching people in vulnerable situations. It's really important for me to say that if there is a person, no matter your gender, right? Because I was talking about me as a woman on the streets of America, being homeless on the streets of America with, in a highly, highly vulnerable situation, in an extreme crisis where I've lost access to all my basic needs, right? This has happened to me on and off the last year, where I was in a state of crisis, and I would have men and women approach me and try to coerce me into prostitution, right? Now, something that's really important to understand is that if a person is approaching an individual and that individual is in a state of crisis, that person who is in a state of crisis cannot consent. Even if they are an adult, they cannot consent to a sexual transaction or sex acts with another person when they are in a state of crisis because their mental health is compromised. This is really, really important to become aware of and grasp. So if there is a person, now I'm going to use the context that I've lived through, okay? Again, human trafficking manifests in many different forms. So if, say in my context, I'm going to describe the context, one of many that I've lived through, okay? This is just one of many different forms that I've lived through. If I am on the street and I am in a state of crisis, right? My mental health is drastically compromised because I've lost access to all my basic needs, and I have a person watching, right? A human trafficker watching me. And they see and they observe, because this is what human traffickers do. They look for people who are vulnerable. And they use the person's vulnerabilities as leverage over that person to coerce them. Now, even though I am an adult, if someone approaches me when I am in a compromised situation, when I am in a state of crisis on the street, right? In this context, being on the street, you are highly, highly mentally compromised because you, as I described in a previous video, it puts you in a chronic distress response. So this is higher, this is a greater level of stress. When I say distress, it's a higher level of stress, okay? It's not just stressful, it's distressing. It's putting you into a state of severe psychosis, and someone sees that and they approach you and they try to coerce you into a sexual transaction. Okay, this is a form of human trafficking, and what's really important, another thing that's really important, and I want to reiterate, is that a person who is in a compromised state cannot consent to sex. Okay? an adult. Right now I'm talking about legal adults, okay? A legal adult who is in a compromised situation that compromises their clarity, that compromises their sobriety, that compromises their ability to make clear-headed decisions because they're in a state where they are not clear or they are compromised. They're in a state of crisis in some way, shape, or form. They cannot consent to engaging in the sexual transaction. So this is why this is considered a form of human trafficking. And it totally makes sense when you're looking at it clearly, when you have a clear understanding of this, right? That if somebody were to prey upon a vulnerable person or demographic of people because they've lost clarity of mind, they are compromised in many different ways because they're out on the street and they're in a mental state of crisis and a physical crisis. They cannot consent to sexual acts, right? If I'm really focused on the sexual transaction right now, they cannot consent to participating in a sexual transaction. If I'm talking about sex trafficking right now, so there are other forms of human trafficking, but right now I'm talking about sexual human trafficking. And this is something that I really needed to expand upon because like I said in a previous video, I was talking about as an adult, I said as an adult who can consent to prostitution, I will never do that. Well, it depends on the situation, even as an adult. If you're looking at this from a psychological perspective, if you're looking at the situation from a trauma-informed perspective, and you're looking at adults who are in states of crises, this is how human traffickers operate. They will prey upon people who are in a state of crisis, and they will use that as leverage to coerce them into a life of prostitution. And then a lot of these women who are coerced into prostitution end up being pulled into greater and greater manifestations of human trafficking, and they're pulled off the radar. A lot of them never to be seen again because they were coerced into a situation because they were in a state of survival, because they needed provisions, they needed food, they needed, safety and shelter from the elements, they need clothing, they need a sense of relief from being on the street. There's so many things that you need when you have nothing and you're on the street, right? And so human traffickers see this and they prey upon those vulnerabilities. They prey upon the fact that we as human beings have these basic needs, and if we don't have them, we can't survive, right? So this is what I wanted to share with everyone today. I want to encourage everybody to be brave enough to face the true nature of human beings in order to become aware, alert, awake. And a lot of these people who are doing these heinous things are people that you would never think would do things like this, okay? They're highly respected people in their communities. you know, human traffickers don't look any certain kind of way, okay? They're in every community, they're in every city, they're out there on every street looking for vulnerable people, okay? This is the truth of our human existence worldwide, okay? And I've met so many people from so many different organizations and nonprofits who have really been, the phrase that's coming to me is they have been boots on the ground, engaged in helping people who are human trafficked and exposing human trafficking all over the world, not just here in the US, because this is happening everywhere in the world. And I have a lot of stories that I want to share. I've gathered a lot of information about this as an observer, but also as a woman who has an embodied experience where I've lived through and survived so many different forms of human trafficking. And I'm going to get into the details of this over time and talk about how this relates to healing and reversing the aging process. Everything I talk about on my channel, every single thing I talk about on my channel is related to healing, transformation, and reversing the aging process. It's all relevant. It's all relevant. This is what people really need to understand. Every video, every topic I speak about is relevant, okay? And I'm here to help people become aware. I have been guided into every facility that I went into and crossed paths with every person that I did to gain information, okay? Everything that I've lived through was not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that I lived through it. It's not a coincidence that I escaped. It's not a coincidence that every time I found a way and that I'm still alive. So this is what I'm here to share with everyone today, and I will continue in the next video.